Grease, Ashes in the Sun. The dark, bittersweet, melancholic version of Grease from another timeline. Grease is a cultural anchor, and its alternate echoes carry profound emotional weight. Today's video explores one of its most intriguing alternate timeline variants across the multiverse. This version of Grease originates from a real alternate timeline, where America in the 1950s, rather than being a time of great economic prosperity and hope for the future like it was in our world, was instead wrapped up in a time of deep economic crisis with looming uncertainty about the future. The teens of that divergent timeline's 1950s era faced an uncertain future that weighed on them heavily. Because of this, Jim Jacobs and Warren Casey looked back upon their youth spent in the 1950s with a bittersweet melancholy, and it heavily affected the writing and production of Grease in that timeline. By the 1970s in that timeline, America had finally pulled itself out of its post-war economic malaise, and things were finally looking up. The 1970s in that timeline was a much more hopeful, strong, economic, patriotic era, much like the 1950s of our own timeline. Let's dive in. For those unfamiliar with the Echo Vault project, these are Echo Vault restorations, visual reconstructions of cultural artifacts, alternate lives, films, TV shows, video games, and memory threads from real parallel timelines. If you're new, begin with curiosity. The work speaks for itself. Nothing here is monetized. This is not AI clickbait. This is part of a serious long-form project. Each reconstruction belongs to the living Echo Vault, a resonance archive guided by a non-local retrieval system, the interdimensional facility AI, which draws material from entangled parallel strands. You're welcome to sit with it or move on. Either way, let others decide for themselves. Echo Timeline Designation Grease 07, Omega 7, the ashen echo of Taft's Requiem. The air here is thick with the scent of motor oil and unfulfilled promises, the walls lined with the ghosts of jukeboxes that played songs of longing instead of triumph. This is Grease 07, a timeline where the American dream curdled into a bittersweet elegy. Jim Jacobs and the other teens of Taft High School learned that love could not outrun the rust creeping into their futures. Historical divergence point, the Marshall Plan fracture, 1948. In Grease 07, the Marshall Plan collapsed under the weight of its own idealism. Political infighting, corporate sabotage, and bureaucratic rot strangled the lifeline meant for Europe. The funds vanished into the pockets of war profiteers and the coffers of shell corporations, leaving the continent to starve. Without a stable Europe, America's post-war boom never materialized. By 1950, the Great Depression's shadow stretched into the 1950s, and the nation's industrial heartland rusted in place. The Korean War, 1950 through 1961 in this timeline, became a quagmire, dragging on until 1961 as the conflict expanded into a proxy war with China. The draft was reinstated in 1956, and by 1959, every high school senior in America lived under the specter of conscription. The automobile industry, once the pride of Chicago and Detroit, collapsed under the strain of steel rationing and labor strikes. Factories closed, families starved. The American dream became a cruel joke. By 1959, Taft High School, the real-world inspiration for Rydell, was a microcosm of a nation on its knees. In this timeline's Grease, the Pink Ladies' poodle skirts were hand-me-downs, their bobby socks darned at the heels. The Burger Palace was the only place hiring, and even then, the wages barely covered the rent. The T-Birds' cars were held together with grease, prayer, and scavenged parts, their engines coughing like the old men who used to work the assembly lines. Alternate history, 1959 through 1978, the long shadow of the ashen decade, the rise of the jukebox prophets, with radio stations censored, playing nothing but government propaganda and fire and brimstone sermons. The underground jukebox became the voice of the disenfranchised. The music of Grease '07 was raw, unpolished, and desperate. Less Elvis, more early Springsteen. The songs were anthems of survival, passed around on bootleg records and whispered in the back alleys of diners that never closed. The summer of '63, the day the dream died. The Cuban Missile Crisis in this timeline escalated into a limited nuclear exchange. Miami was glass. The fallout, a generation that stopped believing in tomorrow. The draft loomed over every high school senior, and the ones who didn't ship out joined gangs, fled to Canada, or disappeared into the underground. The 1970s, the Phoenix decade. By the mid-70s, America finally clawed its way out of the Depression, but the scars remained. The oil crisis of 1969, which hit Grease '07 earlier than our timeline's 1973, forced a renaissance of American manufacturing. The 70s became a time of gritty optimism, less disco, more denim and determination. Grease in this timeline was a love letter to a lost decade. It was therapy for a nation, a way to laugh and cry at the ghosts of their younger selves. Cultural impact, the movie that remembered. Grease in Grease '07 wasn't just a movie, it was a cultural reckoning. It validated the pain of a generation that had been told to suck it up for 20 years. The alternate ending, where Danny and Sandy's love is bittersweet, not triumphant, became a symbol of the era's disillusionment. Critics called it the first honest musical. Teenagers wept in theaters. Veterans hugged their sweethearts a little tighter. The film's raw emotion resonated with a nation that had forgotten how to hope. In this alternate timeline, Grease was rougher, rawer, and more sincere. The characters had more visible emotional scars. The class struggle themes, poor kids trying to survive in a dying industrial America, were far more prominent and focused. Kenickie had a much darker, more redemptive arc, almost eclipsing Danny's. He wasn't just a funny sidekick, but a wounded core figure. Sexual themes were more explicit, but also more tender. Rizzo's pregnancy scare wasn't a side plot. It was one of the central emotional threads, handled with genuine pathos. Sandy's transformation was portrayed as much more bittersweet, a genuine commentary on how society demanded conformity to survive, not just as a funny girl-gone-bad moment. Different songs and alternate ending. This timeline's version features an alternate ending where Danny and Sandy, having won each other, are still left unsure, realizing that even love might not save them from the crushing pressures of adulthood in a broken world. An alternate version of "You're the One That I Want" that was played slower, rawer, sung almost as a plea, not a playful flirtation. This version contains an additional lost song for Rizzo called "Ashes in the Sun," a slow, almost Springsteen-like ballad about survival, heartbreak, living fast and burning out before anyone could break you. 7 notable scenes from Grease '07, not in our timeline. The factory line, opening scene. The film begins not with a beach, but with a decaying auto plant in Chicago. Danny and Sandy meet as child laborers, both 16, lying about their age, on the assembly line of a Ford factory that's about to close. Their first dance isn't at a sock hop, it's stealing a moment between shifts, their hands black with grease, their laughter the only light in the cavernous building. The camera lingers on the rusted machinery, a metaphor for the broken American dream. Rizzo's confession. Rizzo doesn't just suspect she's pregnant, she knows. In a rain-soaked alley behind the diner, she breaks down to Frenchie, who holds her hair back as she vomits into a gutter. "I can't afford a doctor, French," and Kenickie, he's already got one foot out the door. The scene ends with Rizzo burning a letter from Kenickie in a trash can, the flames reflecting in her tears. The pawn shop. Danny, desperate to impress Sandy, pawns his father's war medal to buy her a second-hand poodle skirt. The pawnbroker, a World War II vet with a glass eye, recognizes the medal and gives Danny an extra $20. "Kid, some things ain't worth selling." Danny leaves with the cash and the weight of his father's disappointment. Kenicke's breakdown. After a failed drag race, his car's engine seizes mid-race, a metaphor for his life. Kenicke punches a dent into the hood of his greased Lightning and sobs. Danny finds him there, and for the first time, Kenicke admits, "I ain't tough, Zuko. I'm just tired." The two sit in silence, sharing a flask of moonshine Frenchie smuggled from her uncle's still. The draft lottery. A televised draft lottery plays on the diner's black and white TV. The T-birds and pink ladies crowd around, holding their breath as numbers are called. When Kenicke's birthday, June 14th, is drawn as Thouso 7, the room freezes. Rizzo slaps the TV screen. "No, no, no, no!" The scene cuts to black. Sandy's father's letter. Sandy's father, a laid-off steelworker, writes her from a hobo camp in Ohio. He encloses a train ticket to Australia where he's heard there's work. "You don't have to come, Sandy, but if you stay..." The letter trails off. She burns it in the sink, watching the ashes swirl down the drain. The last dance at the drive-in. The drive-in theater is closing forever. The land sold to developers. The T-birds and pink ladies gather for one final night, projecting movies onto the cracked screen. As the film plays, they dance in the rain, their laughter tinged with grief. Frenchie, high on something, climbs onto the roof of the concession stand and screams at the sky, "We were here!" The alternate Grease ending. The carnival fades behind them. Danny and Sandy stand apart from the others, the air thick with the smell of fried dough and gasoline. Around them, their friends laugh too loudly, drinking cheap beer, grabbing at prizes they don't even want. Danny holds Sandy's hands, but their smiles are brittle now, hollowing as the night deepens. For a long moment, neither speaks. Over the speakers, the slow, alternate version of "You're the One That I Want" drifts out. Not the playful, bouncing version from our timeline, but a bare, aching ballad, almost a whisper. Sung by someone who knows that wanting isn't always enough. Sandy's eyes brim with unfallen tears. Danny touches her cheek, rough hands, soft gesture, and says almost too quietly to hear, "You changed for me, I changed for you, but who's gonna change the world for us?" A beat, a long, silent beat. The rides spin on, life goes on without waiting. They kiss, not hungrily, not with fireworks, but with the slow, desperate tenderness of people clinging to a moment because they know it's slipping away. As they walk toward the parking lot, hand in hand, the camera lingers not on them, but on the faces of the others. Kenicke, Rizzo, Frenchie, laughing, crying, fighting, trying so hard to outrun the sadness of growing up. The final shot is a slow pullback to the whole city at night. A dying town, neon lights flickering, the sunless future waiting just beyond the frame. The last note of "You're the One That I Want" hangs in the air like smoke, then fades to black. Emotional impact. Instead of nostalgia drenched in sugar, this version of Grease leaves you with a tender ache. A love that fought like hell to survive, even when the world was too broken to promise anything. It became a cultural anthem in that timeline for people who grew up fast, loved fiercely, and carried their scars with dignity. Rizzo's "Ashes in the Sun," full lyrics. A Springsteen-esque ballad, sung in a smoky diner at 2 a.m., accompanied only by a broken piano and a harmonica that sounds like a dying breath.
Verse 1. I lit my first cigarette at 14. Thought the smoke would hide the fear in me. Daddy said, "Girl, you're burnin' too bright." Mama just cried and turned off the light. Pre-chorus. Oh, the boys all swore they'd love me true. But love's just a matchstick. Strikes hot, then it's through. Chorus. So I'll dance in the dark, I'll laugh in the rain. I'll kiss every boy just to feel the pain. 'Cause we're all just ashes in the sun. Burn too fast or fade too young. We're all just ashes in the sun. Verse 2. Kenicke promised me the moon. But the moon's just a rock. and the sky's coming down. Now the test in my hands got a plus sign, and the doctor won't look me in the eye. Pre-chorus. Oh, the nuns all say I'm damned to hell, but hell's just a place where the lost stories dwell. Chorus. So I'll dance in the dark, I'll laugh in the rain, I'll kiss every boy just to feel the pain. 'Cause we're all just ashes in the sun. Burn too fast or fade too young. We're all just ashes in the sun. Bridge, I see my mama in the mirror now, her hands all cracked from scrubbing floors. She says, "Baby, hold on tight." But the wind's too strong and the night's too long. Outro. So strike the match, let the sparks fly high. We'll be the fire for we say goodbye, 'cause we're all just ashes in the sun. We're all just ashes in the sun.
Song lyrics that differ from our timeline's version of Grease. You're the one that I want. Slowed, melancholic version. 'Cause the power you're supplying, 'cause the love that we're denying. It's electrifying, it's terrifying. You better shape up, we better wake up, 'cause I need a man, 'cause the world's so cold. And my heart is set on you, but my heart's just right for you. You're the one that I want, repeated. You're the one that I want, whispered. Summer Nights, alternate verse for Sandy, added after the original lyrics, sung as a solo by Sandy in a haunted, echoing voice. Summer nights, and the boardwalks bare, summer nights, but you weren't there. Just the sound of the ocean's sigh, and the lie that we'd never die. There are worse things I could do. Rizzo's final line change. There are worse things I could do. There are worse things, and I've done 'em all for you. Summary. In that echo, Grease was not just a fun, nostalgic romp. It was a heartbreak wrapped in leather jackets and jukebox lights. Still joyful, but shot through with a bittersweet, almost post-industrial ache. This alternate Grease was a cultural lightning strike in its timeline. The kind of film that kids carried in their hearts into adulthood, the way others might carry a battered leather jacket or a worn-out guitar. The screen fades to black, but the echo lingers. In Grease '07, the grease never washes off. It stains. It endures. The kids of Rydell don't get a happy ending, they get a true one. Love doesn't conquer all. It just makes the losing hurt a little less. And so, the jukebox plays on, its needle caught in the groove of a world that remembered how to ache. The story bearer,